Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight, we're venturing somewhere uniquely awful. Not a battlefield, not a dungeon, but somewhere quieter, more intimate. You're not a soldier or a prisoner or a heretic. You're just someone with a problem. A bad leg, a rotting tooth, a lump that shouldn't be there. And that means only one thing. You're going under the knife. Before anyone knew what going under actually meant. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, just the warm metallic smell of someone else's blood on the tools, and a man who claims he's done this before, probably on a pig. So before the bone saw comes out and your odds of survival drop faster than your blood pressure, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if this is the kind of thing you enjoy falling asleep to. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and whether you think you'd make it to the end of the procedure. Personally, I wouldn't. Now settle in, breathe slowly, and try not to flinch. Let's begin. You come to slowly, which is unfortunate. Consciousness returns not with warmth or clarity, but with cold wood against your back. The muffled murmur of a crowd, and the unsettling realization that you cannot move your arms. They're tied, not tightly, but deliberately, enough that you won't be flailing. Someone has done this before. There's a sharp ache in your side, the one that's been bothering you for weeks. The reason you're here, apparently. You thought you might see a doctor? Instead, you're flat on your back in a drafty room that smells like sweat, iron, and something sweet that's gone very, very sour. Above you, the ceiling sags with the weight of age and mould. To your left, someone coughs wetly. To your right, something metallic clinks. You recognise that sound in a way that makes your stomach knot. It's the sound of metal on metal, sharpening. A man leans over you. He's not young. His breath is worse than the room. There's stubble on his chin, stained yellow near the edges, and a streak of something red just below his left ear. Not his red, you assume. His hands are calloused and unwashed. He smells of gin and urgency. He looks down at you, squints once, then nods like someone inspecting a ham. You're the ham. He doesn't introduce himself. That would imply a kind of civility no one here can afford. Instead, he grunts something about holding still, as if you were trying not to. You aren't gagged, but you wish you were. Every breath risks a scream, and screaming, from what you remember, only encourages the wrong kind of attention. Besides, the surgeon's already rolling up his sleeves, stained cuffs folding back, with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for eating a messy pie. Around you, people are watching. You hadn't noticed them at first. Shadows tucked into wooden benches, rising around the room, theatre style. Faces half lit, eager. Some are students, others are just curious. Some look green, some look hungry. No one looks like they're here to help. You've become the evening's entertainment, and the worst part is that you didn't buy a ticket. You are the ticket. This is not a hospital, at least not in the way you understand the word. There is no sterile white light. No nurses with soothing voices. No buzz of machinery designed to keep you alive. What you have instead is a pile of rags that used to be clean, a bucket that used to be empty, and a surgeon who used to care. Now he works fast because that's all he can offer you. Speed, not skill, not safety, just the hope that you'll pass out before he hits something important. Or not. You might be awake for the whole thing. People often are. Your heart races, pounding hard enough that you can feel it in your throat. There's no clock here, but you understand what time it is. It's too late. You agreed to this technically, or maybe someone agreed on your behalf. Maybe you were just told, very firmly, that this was your only chance. That if they didn't cut it out, the lump, the abscess, the whatever it is, you'd be dead by week's end. As if this isn't already a kind of death. The tools are being laid out now. You can't see them, but you can hear the roll of leather unwrapping like a butcher's kit on market day. There's a rhythm to it. Blade, clamp, hook, saw. The instruments aren't clean. Why would they be? Cleanliness is a theory that hasn't caught on yet. The blood on that saw, not yours, not yet. Just a reminder of who came before you. and how it went for them. Spoiler, not great. The surgeon hums a little tune, something aimless and tuneless like a lullaby no one asked for. He cracks his neck. Someone in the audience leans forward. You wonder briefly if anyone in this room knows your name. Probably not. It won't matter in a few minutes. Here's what you need to understand. This isn't about fixing you. Not really. This is about trying. About doing something instead of nothing. That abscess might kill you, yes, but so might the infection you'll get from this room. These tools. This man. The odds are grim. The hope is minimal. But people have survived worse. Probably. Maybe. There's a pat on your shoulder. It's meant to be reassuring, but it's just damp. He says, "This'll be quick," like a bartender pouring the last drink of the night. One student laughs nervously. Another one writes something down. You take a breath, deep and ragged, and brace for what comes next. Because it's coming. And the only thing more terrifying than that is the fact that you're awake for all of it. Let's talk about your surgeon. You wouldn't have chosen him. Let's get that out of the way. If someone handed you a menu of possible options for the person about to slice open your body, this man would not have made the short list, or the long list. He wouldn't have even made it into the building. But here he is standing over you with the confidence of a man who's done this 100 times, and the hygiene of a man who's done it all in the same shirt. He's not a doctor, not in the modern sense. No degrees hang on the wall, no certifications, no licenses, no years of supervised training. If he ever studied medicine, it was likely in a pub, or perhaps in a freezing tent on a battlefield, where the choices were cut now, or watch them die. And to be fair, he did choose cut now. He's quick if nothing else. A man of action, a man who looks at a leg and sees firewood. His apron used to be white. Now it's a patchwork of stains, brown, red, yellowish green, in one spot that probably used to be someone's liver. It hasn't been washed in a while, possibly ever. That's not an oversight. It's part of the look. Surgeons of his time wore filthy aprons like merit badges. The more stained, the more experienced. If the cloth is stiff enough to stand on its own, you're in capable hands, apparently. His tools are in a leather roll he keeps tucked under one arm, like a prized possession. And they are, in a way, blades worn smooth from too much sharpening. A saw with a handle darkened by years of ungloved hands. A hook, because sometimes the thing you're trying to reach doesn't want to be reached. Nothing is clean. Some of it is rusty. All of it is familiar to him, and utterly foreign to you. You might recognise a few shapes, but not their purpose. He does. That's comforting. Or would be, if his hands weren't shaking ever so slightly from the gin. He smells like gin and sweat, and the inside of an old boot. There's a tremor in his voice, but not from fear, from habit. He talks fast, barely pauses between thoughts, and mutters when no one answers. Occasionally he glances toward the gallery of students with a bored expression, like a magician forced to do the same trick for the 100th time. He is, in a way, and you are the rabbit. His bedside manner, such as it is, hovers somewhere between distracted and mildly inconvenienced. He might ask how you're feeling. He doesn't listen to the answer. He might even offer you a bit of alcohol or a leather strap to bite down on, depending on how generous he's feeling that day. But don't mistake this for kindness. It's just protocol. An old, blood-stained dance he's done too many times to find interesting anymore. You wonder what brought him here. What made him decide one day that sawing through people was a good use of his time. Maybe he started as a barber. Many surgeons did. Cutting hair, pulling teeth, lancing boils. Eventually someone asked, "Can you take a toe?" And it just escalated from there. Or maybe he was a butcher, and someone realised that his skill with carcasses translated well enough to the human body, at least from the elbow down. It's possible he was once a military surgeon, the kind who worked in tents behind the front lines, surrounded by screams and cannon smoke, removing limbs by the dozen with only seconds to spare before the next patient collapsed. If he learned anything in that setting, it was efficiency, not precision, not gentleness, just raw, brutal speed. That's still his specialty, and make no mistake, he's proud of it. You'll hear him brag about his fastest amputation, 45 seconds flat, from blade to bone to bandage. He doesn't mention the survival rate. That's not the point. The point is he got it off. He got it done. And really, in a world without anesthesia, that's about as close as anyone comes to mercy. You might also notice that he doesn't use gloves. Almost no one does yet. Germ theory exists technically, but it hasn't caught on. Washing hands between patients is considered unnecessary, even dangerous. Some surgeons think it removes the protective layer of grime that keeps the blood from sticking too much. You are tragically part of the experiment. He taps your arm once, a kind of unspoken ready that doesn't wait for consent. You're not a person to him, not really. You're a procedure, a case, a limb to be removed, or a wound to be explored. And he will do it quickly, not because he fears for your comfort, but because you are already one in a long line of unfortunate bodies that pass through his care like meat through a grinder. This is who's cutting you open today. A man who knows just enough to be dangerous, who's lost enough patience to stop asking why, who sharpens his tools with the focus of a man polishing coins. Not because he treasures you, but because he hates it when the blade sticks. You might have thought, in some hopeful corner of your mind, that surgery would be private, that the moment someone decided to open your body with a blade, the room would clear, that curtains would be drawn, that dignity, in all its fragile glory, would be preserved. That was naive. Instead, you're on display. The room around you is circular, rising in steep wooden tiers, like some ancient lecture hall or gladiator pit. Above you, rows of faces, dozens of them. Students mostly, young men in coats too clean for this place, clutching notebooks they plan to stain with your suffering. Some watch with interest, some with nausea. A few look away, but not many. This is what they came for. The show, the scream, the squirm. You are tonight's lesson, tonight's entertainment, tonight's sacrifice to the altar of progress. Congratulations. The space itself is grim. Not dusty exactly. Too much blood for that, but dark, humid, and deeply unclean. The floors are wooden and warped, and they creak beneath the weight of history and heavy boots. A faint, permanent smell clings to everything. It's not just blood, it's old flesh, pus, spirits, a mixture of life trying to leave and death already moved in. You inhale through your mouth. It doesn't help. You're lying on what could generously be called a bench, but feels more like a slab. There's no padding, no pillow, just a thick wooden surface beneath your spine and a slight downward angle, so the blood doesn't pool too badly. Beneath the bench is sawdust, not neatly spread but scattered by necessity, like someone's trying to soak up a mess that keeps coming back. Which, of course, they are. There are no antiseptics, no clean linens, no sterile instruments, sealed in plastic. The only thing between you and every person who came before you is time, and not nearly enough of it. Maybe the bench was wiped down, maybe it wasn't. The surgeon's tools sit on a nearby tray, which looks suspiciously like a kitchen cutting board. One of them still has a bit of something on it. Could be cloth, could be skin, could be you in a few minutes. If you listen carefully, you can hear the audience murmuring. They're discussing you in the abstract. The patient, the specimen, the case. You're not a person here. You're a problem to be solved with a sharp object and a stopwatch. Somewhere in the back, someone bets on whether you'll faint before the second cut. Someone else is sketching your posture, like this is life drawing and not life draining. The windows are small and high, designed to keep the stench in and the sympathy out. Light filters through in angled beams, cutting across the dust and highlighting little motes of dried blood, flaking from the last procedure. You try not to look at them. You try not to look at anything, but your eyes wander, because they're the only part of you not currently pinned in place or trembling. A large man stands near your head, an orderly perhaps, or a student unlucky enough to be conscripted into holding your shoulders down. You don't know his name. He doesn't seem interested in yours. His job is to keep you from bolting upright when the knife goes in. That's happened before, apparently. Not everyone stays still once the pain hits. Some people jerk, some thrash. One person bit through their own tongue. That's why there's a leather strap nearby, for your teeth. If you're lucky, someone will remember to give it to you. There's something deeply wrong about being in a place called a theatre and knowing the performance is yours. There are no curtains, no scripts, just a man with a blade and a crowd waiting to see what he finds inside you. You'd call it barbaric if you had the strength, but this is medicine. This is progress. In 100 years, someone will look back on this moment and shake their head in horror. But today, this is just Tuesday. Somewhere behind you, a door creaks open. Another student enters, late. He takes a seat casually, as if he's missed nothing important. Just the part where a living person is nailed to a table with ropes and prayers. He yawns. You almost envy him. Your heart thuds louder now, rising over the murmurs. You want to look away, but there's nowhere else to look. The ceiling is stained, the walls are stained, the people are too, by choice or by proximity. This room doesn't let anything leave clean. Not the tools, not the clothes, not the memories. Least of all, you. And as the surgeon steps closer, you feel it. Not terror exactly, but the horrible, settling realization that everything you're experiencing is normal here. That this isn't an emergency, it's a routine, a ritual, a thing that happens every day. And now it's your turn. They're right there on the tray beside you, lined up like silverware at a particularly vindictive dinner party. The tools. You didn't notice them at first, but now they're impossible to ignore, glinting in the low light, some shiny, some dull, all of them shaped in ways that suggest your body is about to become a problem they intend to solve through violence. There's a scalpel, though that word feels generous. It's small, yes, but the blade looks more like a chipped razor than a precision instrument. It's supposed to make the first cut, gentle, clean, swift. But there's nothing clean about it. The edge is nicked, the handle is cracked, the metal is discoloured in places that metal shouldn't be, and it smells faintly of copper, sweat and something rotten. Beside it, a pair of forceps waits with all the charm of fireplace tongs. These are used to grasp things, flesh mostly. Sometimes arteries, sometimes stray bits of tissue the surgeon needs to hold in place or pull aside or simply remove because it's in the way. They're big, bigger than you expected, thick-handed and heavy-looking, like they were designed with livestock in mind. And honestly, they might have been. There's a retractor too. Think of it as a mechanical yawn for your incision. Its job is to pull things open and keep them that way, which is somehow worse than just cutting you. It's all hinges and teeth, a wicked little cage for the meat inside you. You try not to picture it in action, but your brain does the imagining for you. And then there's the bone saw, and it doesn't look like something that should be used on people. It looks like it belongs in a carpenter's shed. A long serrated blade with a thick wooden handle, the kind of tool a man uses to ruin furniture or build a gallows. The teeth of the saw are jagged, worn from use, and dusted with a pale substance you'd really like to believe is chalk. It isn't. That's bone, someone else's, maybe several someone else's. This tool doesn't get cleaned, it gets wiped, if that. Maybe it was scraped against the table earlier. Maybe it was just dropped in a bucket and swished around a bit. Hygiene at this point in history is more of an afterthought, or more accurately, a future thought. No one's really having it yet. There's also a curved amputation knife, sleek, almost elegant in a sinister way. Its blade is long and slightly crescent-shaped, designed to circle a limb in one quick motion, like ribbon around a maypole, except instead of festivities, the goal is to get through muscle and tendon before the patient kicks the bucket or kicks the surgeon. The handle is dark with age and use, stained the way cutting boards stain after too many onions. Except these weren't onions. You might assume these instruments are stored in sterile cases or under glass. They're not. They come out of a leather roll that looks like it should be carrying paintbrushes or carving tools, and in some cases probably once did. The roll is stained, cracked, and smells like old blood and worse decisions. Some surgeons keep their favourites tucked in coat pockets, right next to their handkerchiefs and tobacco. Others just leave them out between surgeries. No point putting them away when there's always someone else waiting to be opened. Cleaning, such as it exists, is more ceremonial than effective. Maybe a rinse in cold water. Maybe a quick wipe on a rag that hasn't been washed since last season. No one's boiling anything. No one's sterilising. Germ theory, if it's been heard of at all, is dismissed as nonsense. The only thing that gets regularly scrubbed is the floor. And even then, it's more about slipping hazards than sanitation. You wonder how many of these tools have names. Not scientific ones, personal ones. Some of these surgeons have favourites. A blade they trust. A saw with a handle that fits just right. There's comfort in familiarity, even if it's soaked in tragedy. You imagine him picking one up and muttering, "Old Faithful," right before he wedges it between your ribs. The kind of affectionate ritual you'd expect from a man and his dog, not a man and his dissection kit. And heaven help you if he drops something. Because that happens, tools get dropped onto the floor, into buckets, onto other patients, and unless it breaks in half, it's getting picked up, given a lazy shake and put straight back to work. There's no oops, no fresh replacement, just a shrug and a smear. You try not to look at the tray anymore. Try not to think about what each one will do, how it will feel, how long it will last. But it's hard not to imagine the sequence. The first cut, the widening, the sawing, the clamping, the sewing if you're lucky. They don't always sew you up. Sometimes they just pack it with cloth and hope for the best. These tools aren't here to heal you. They're here to try something. To make the problem smaller by making you smaller. To cut away what's killing you and maybe leave just enough behind to live. Or not. Either way, they're ready. Polished if not clean. Trusted if not safe. And already too close. You've probably felt pain before. A bad tooth, a twisted ankle, a broken bone that throbbed for days. Maybe once you cut your hand with a knife in the kitchen and felt that awful bloom of heat and sting. That was a preview, an amuse-bouche. It has not prepared you for what's about to happen. Pain, when it arrives without anesthesia, is not sharp and clean like a movie scream. It's not a moment, it's a condition. It doesn't start and end. It arrives and settles. It burrows. The first cut isn't the worst, not yet. The worst part is realising there's more. That the first burn of the blade is just an introduction. What follows is a deep, spreading ache that seems to exist in more than one part of your body at once, even though it started in just one place. Your body doesn't know what to do with this kind of information. Muscles twitch involuntarily. Limbs jerk. Your chest rises in a frantic rhythm that isn't quite breathing anymore. It's panting, gulping, something primal and uncontrolled. Your heart is hammering so hard you can feel it in your ears, your throat, your fingertips. It isn't just fear anymore. It's overload. The system is short-circuiting. If the blade finds a nerve, and it will, the sensation is indescribable, but we'll try anyway. It's like being set on fire from the inside, like lightning decided to live in your veins. Your vision goes blurry around the edges. You taste copper, even if there's no blood in your mouth. Your spine wants to arch. Your hands want to claw at something. Anything. But you're restrained, of course. For your safety, they said. But really, it's for theirs. The pain doesn't stay in its lane. It travels. It radiates outward, dragging neighbouring muscles and tissues into the disaster like a fire jumping rooftops. And your brain, helpful as always, tries to make sense of it by categorising. Hot, it says, tearing, pressure. But none of those words are right. It's just pain. Pure, concentrated, saturating pain, like being drowned in your own skin. Sometimes people scream, sometimes they don't. Screaming takes air and breathing becomes a luxury. Some make sounds they don't recognise, high and guttural or low and inhuman. Some beg, some pray, some whisper the same word over and over, like a mantra might keep the pain from seeping into their bones. It doesn't, but you try anyway. There's a moment sometimes when the body gives up on panic and moves into something else. Not calm, not peace, just collapse, shock. Your blood pressure drops, your skin goes cold and clammy. Your pupils dilate, you might faint. This is your body trying to survive you, trying to shut the lights off before too much damage gets in. If it works, you'll miss a few minutes. If it doesn't, you'll be here the whole time, fully present, while someone digs inside you like they're rooting around in a sack of potatoes. And then there's the bleeding. It's fast, it's loud in a strange way. You can hear it, not just the physical splatter, but the rushing inside your own skull. A roaring, pulsing static that competes with your thoughts, and usually wins. The blood itself is warm. Too warm. It coats everything. The bench, the surgeon, the floor. The sawdust underneath you is there to soak it up, but even that has its limits. Eventually, it will clump and pile, and you will feel the dampness creeping toward your side. You might start to dissociate. That's not just a fancy word for daydreaming, it's your mind splitting in half. One part stays behind on the table, the other floats above, a silent spectator watching this grotesque scene with detachment. You might even hear yourself scream and not believe it's you. That's common. It's not a comfort, but it's something. And when they finally stop, if they stop, the pain doesn't end. It changes. It settles deeper. A heavy, throbbing ache that spreads like poison. It's the pain of absence, of things removed. Tissue, limb, dignity. You're lighter, but not better. And your body knows something is missing. You may not be sure what yet. You'll find out later. Or not. That depends on how well the wound behaves. You may think there's some solace in the fact that others have endured this before you. There isn't. There's only the knowledge that suffering is not unique, which somehow makes it worse. It's not personal, it's routine. Pain isn't a tragedy here. It's a side effect, a cost of doing business. And so you lie there, still strapped, still bleeding, still feeling every raw nerve sing like broken violin strings. And in that moment, when your eyes water and your jaw aches from clenching, you realise something dreadful. They're only halfway done. You didn't expect to be tied down. Not until it was too late. The ropes were already knotted before you understood why they were there. Coarse, stiff cords looped around your wrists and ankles. Not tight enough to cut off circulation, but firm enough to stop you from doing what your body will almost certainly try to do. Escape. Restraints weren't optional. They were standard. Not because surgeons enjoyed making you feel helpless, though some didn't mind, but because they knew what came next. They'd seen it before. The moment the blade touches skin, the patient thrashes. Sometimes they convulse. Sometimes they try to sit up, punch, claw, run. Anything to create distance between themselves and the steel. But there is no distance here. No escape. Only knots and gravity. If the ropes weren't enough, there were other methods. Sometimes it took 4 men to hold a patient still, 1 for each limb. Sometimes a strong-armed student would sit across the chest, or press down on the thighs, using their full weight like a living paperweight. Occasionally, the surgeon himself would bark orders, while pinning a shoulder in place with his elbow. Human restraint for human panic. An ecosystem of desperation. Then comes the sound. The scream is not cinematic. It doesn't come out clean or brave. It breaks, it tears, it changes pitch 3 times in the same breath. Some patients scream with every ounce of their being, not just in pain, but in protest, disbelief, betrayal. As if they thought, just for a moment, this might be different, that it might hurt, yes, but not this much. That surely the stories were exaggerated. They weren't. Other patients don't scream at all. Not because they're brave, because they can't. Their bodies lock up, clenching every muscle until the throat closes and nothing comes out. The mouth opens, the eyes widen, but there's only silence. It's almost worse. The silent ones are the ones whose minds fracture, who come back changed, if they come back at all. Some patients manage a few coherent words, prayers mostly, or please, or a mother's name. One man repeated the word stop until his voice gave out. Another just shouted why over and over until the surgeon finally told him, because I have to, which, in its own twisted way, was true. And then there are the teeth. You wouldn't think about them, but your jaw will clench tighter than it's meant to. And if no one gives you a strap of leather or a rag to bite down on, your own teeth become your enemy. Some people chip them, some crack molars, some bite straight through their tongue, blood pouring from the mouth, not from trauma, but from self-inflicted panic. That's how strong the reaction is. You'll hurt yourself trying to survive what's being done to you. Children were not spared from this, by the way. They had surgeries too. Hernias, tumours, bone issues. They were restrained the same way, if not more. Smaller limbs meant smaller ropes, but the fear was the same size, sometimes larger. Their screams were sharper, shriller, less shaped by shame or pride. A child's scream has no filter. It slices through the air like a knife. Students took notes while they wailed. Because yes, this was all done in front of an audience. Observers with notebooks and questions, and stomachs that may or may not hold. They watched the screams with the same analytical detachment you'd use on a scientific experiment. Subject appears agitated, one might write. Convulsions during incision, another. Pain was not just tolerated, it was documented, measured, discussed afterward over lunch. If the patient passed out, the surgery continued. If they didn't, the surgery still continued. The scream didn't change the outcome. It wasn't a signal. It was background noise. Expected, normal. A regular part of the process, like the blood or the stench or the frantic grip of fingers on wood, as if splinters might offer salvation. And after it was over, if you were lucky enough to survive, the restraints came off. Slowly, cautiously, as if you might still bolt, even with half your body missing or sewn shut. Some patients needed to be carried away. Others just collapsed into themselves, shivering, soaked, silent. There were no recovery wards, no therapists, no one asking how you felt emotionally. You were alive. That was the entire metric of success. You're not expected to endure this quietly. No one does. But you're also not expected to be comforted. This is pain as protocol. Your suffering is not unique. It's not even interesting. It's a noise in the background of medical history. Loud, human, and deeply, brutally common. There's a reason your surgeon seems like he's in a hurry. It's not because he has somewhere better to be, though he might, or because he dislikes your company, though he definitely does. No, he's moving quickly because in this particular brand of medieval medical theatre, speed is survival. Not just yours, mind you, his too. Without anesthesia, time becomes the enemy. Every second the blade is in your flesh is a second your body is screaming, convulsing, bleeding, sweating, resisting. The longer the operation, the greater the risks of shock, of blood loss, of infection, and of you bolting upright and throwing the whole scene into chaos. The faster they cut, the better the odds that you'll still be alive when they're finished. Whether that's a mercy or a mistake is a separate matter. Surgeons developed reputations not for delicacy or insight, but for raw, blistering speed. The best ones, or at least the most famous, could remove a limb in under 60 seconds. That includes slicing through skin, severing muscle, sawing through bone and slapping on a tourniquet before the stump decided to become a geyser. It was a skill honed through repetition, muscle memory, and a general disregard for small talk. Take Robert Liston, the so-called fastest knife in the West End. A legend in surgical circles, Liston was known to operate with such velocity that assistants had to back up or risk losing fingers. He once completed an amputation in 28 seconds flat. In another case, one that is now legendary for all the wrong reasons, he amputated a man's leg in under 3 minutes. But in his fervour, also sliced off his assistant's fingers and accidentally slashed the coattails of an onlooker, who promptly fainted and died of a heart attack. The patient, the assistant, and the observer all died. A 300% mortality rate. A record as far as anyone knows. But Liston wasn't alone. Surgeons of the time took pride in their speed. They practiced their motions the way a magician might practice sleight of hand. Only their rabbits were real people, and the trick usually ended with screaming. Some even performed timed demonstrations in front of students. Stopwatches were involved. Cheers were not uncommon. Applause if you survived. If you didn't, well, at least the surgeon looked impressive doing it. Of course, speed had its drawbacks. Mistakes were frequent. A leg might be removed when the intention was only to lance an abscess. Fingers went missing. Arteries were missed or accidentally nicked. In one reported case, the surgeon removed the wrong limb and then, realising his error, quickly removed the other one too, as if quantity might redeem quality. The patient died, of course, but the surgeon's reputation for decisive action somehow remained intact. Speed also meant roughness. There was no time to be gentle. The knife was not guided with tenderness. It was driven like a chisel. The saw wasn't drawn like a violin bow. It was yanked like someone trying to cut firewood before a storm. Bones weren't merely sliced, they were shattered, splintered, and pried apart like cheap furniture. Patients often passed out from the trauma of the sawing alone, and if they didn't, they wished they had. And yet in this world, being fast was the closest thing to being good. A slow surgeon was a cruel one. They drew out the agony. They gave the patient time to think, to panic, to bleed out while the surgeon debated the angle of his approach. No one wanted to be operated on by a philosopher. They wanted someone who could get in, get the job done, and get out before their nervous system had a full-blown revolt. You can see it in your own surgeon. The way he moves, rehearsed and confident. There's a rhythm to it. Knife, cut, saw, tourniquet. He doesn't stop to explain, doesn't pause to reassure. His mind is 3 steps ahead of the procedure. His hands are already reaching for the next tool before the first one hits the tray. He is not here to comfort, he is here to conquer time. And in a way, it works. The limb comes off before your body can truly register what's happening. The worst is over before your screams reach full volume. The pain is still unbearable, the blood still flowing, the terror still total, but it's quick, brief, efficient, like being mugged by a man who leaves you with exact change. It's only after it's done, when the blood begins to slow and the pressure bandage is tied with a final tug, that you realise how close you were to dying, not just from the injury that brought you here, but from the very act of trying to survive it. The surgeon steps back, breathless, soaked, already wiping his hands on a cloth that used to be white. He nods once like a man clocking out. You don't thank him, not because you're ungrateful, but because your mouth won't move. You're too tired, too hollowed out, too aware of the absurd, violent miracle you just endured. You were cut open, with tools better suited to a barn than a body, and somehow you're still here. Barely. The cutting is over. For now, the saw is set down, the ropes are loosened, the crowd shifts, bored or satisfied or vaguely unsettled, and begins to file out. You've survived the surgery, technically, and for a fleeting moment, you might believe the worst has passed, that the pain, the screaming, the gushing red flood, all of it was the peak, the climax of suffering. That now comes rest, healing, relief. It's a nice thought. Hold on to it for a minute, then let it go. Because the truth is this: the surgery was only the beginning. The blade was fast, brutal, and merciful in its own barbaric way. But infection? Infection is patient. Infection waits. It doesn't announce itself with a dramatic entrance. It creeps in through the open wound, through the frayed edge of the bandage, through the surgeon's fingers, through the rag that wiped the blood, and was then folded and used again. Your body is open now, exposed. You're less a person than a system of holes, and the world around you is full of things waiting to climb inside. Bacteria, though no one calls them that yet, hover in the air, cling to the surgeon's coat, smear on the tools, live in the water used to clean your skin. They are not rare, they are everywhere, and they do not sleep. There is no germ theory yet, not in any practical sense. The idea that invisible organisms cause disease exists in obscure books, debated by men in powdered wigs who've never had to wipe pus from a screaming man's leg. Your surgeon doesn't believe in germs, he believes in miasma, bad air, and if he's feeling especially cautious, he might burn a bit of sulphur in the room and call it sterile. The rest is up to fate. Your wound is packed with cloth, not stitched. The cloth is not clean. It is there to absorb blood, but it also absorbs everything else: sweat, dirt, microbes. It's pressed in firmly, tied with bandages that haven't been boiled or bleached or changed since yesterday, maybe longer. The bandage is tight, not to protect you, but to keep you from looking at it. You're not supposed to see what's happening underneath, but you'll know soon enough. It starts with warmth, not the good kind, not the healing, soothing kind. This warmth has a pulse, a fever. Your skin flushes near the site, and your body begins to shiver, even as it burns. The wound starts to smell, faintly at first, then insistently. A sweet, rotting scent like meat left out too long in the sun. You recognize it instinctively, even if you've never smelled it before. It is the scent of the body, losing a battle it didn't know had begun. Next comes the pus, yellow, green, sometimes streaked with red. It seeps from the edges of the dressing, thick, slow, and somehow alive. You might feel it bubbling beneath the bandage, pressure building where pressure shouldn't be. You want to call someone, ask for help. But what would they do? The surgeon doesn't have antibiotics. He doesn't have antiseptics. His solution is usually more cutting. If the infection spreads, he'll come back with the saw. Gangrene is the real monster. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It just advances, tissue dying inch by inch, blackening, curling, turning brittle like charred paper. If you're lucky, someone notices early. If not, the smell will notice for you. It clings to everything. Your clothes, your cot, the inside of your nose. It becomes your name before it becomes your death. And yes, sometimes there are maggots. They show up uninvited, laid in the folds of cloth by flies that snuck in through broken windows, or hovered near your body while you drifted in and out of fevered sleep. Ironically, maggots can help. They eat dead flesh and leave the rest alone. Some surgeons even let them stay, on purpose. But you won't find comfort in that. No one does. It's hard to feel hope while insects clean your bones. The hospital itself doesn't help. The walls are soaked with history, and not the proud kind. Beds are reused, cots unwashed. Floors are mopped with grey water and nothing more. The staff does what they can, but what they can do is very little. You're lucky to have a roof, a mattress, someone to check the bandage once a day. Privacy is non-existent. You groan alongside others. You hear their wounds fester before yours does. Some patients die days after surgery, not because the procedure failed, but because the invisible world got there first. Their hearts beat too fast, then too slow. Their breath turns shallow. Their eyes go dull. One moment they're cursing. The next they're still, covered hastily with a sheet that doesn't cover the stink. You lie there, sweating, watching the ceiling spin in slow circles. Your mouth tastes like iron. Your stomach rolls. You wonder how many others have bled on this bed, how many made it out. You wonder whether your fever is a sign of healing or a warning bell. And the worst part is no one can tell you, not yet. Because the real horror of surgery before anesthesia wasn't the pain or the sore or the screams. It was the waiting afterward, wondering if your body would turn on itself, wondering if the worst part was truly over, or if it had only just begun. You're not alone here, not in this cot, not in this ward, not in this century of suffering. Around you, behind the thin curtains and blood-stained sheets, lie others, patients like you, if you can still be called that. Victims, more accurately. Survivors, if they're lucky. Some of them breathe heavily through clenched teeth. Others don't make a sound. The silence is worse. To your left, there's a soldier. His uniform's been cut away, the lower half of his right leg, wrapped in a clumsy, bulbous bandage that already reeks. He came from the front, not the front of a line, but of a war. The cannonball missed, but the splinters didn't. He was dragged off the field and laid on a butcher's table before he even stopped bleeding. No ether, no chloroform. Just two men holding him down, and one man with a saw who didn't blink once. You can still see the ring of bruises on his arms where they restrained him. His stump is infected. He knows it. You know it. The surgeon knows it too. They'll be back soon to take the rest of the leg. Across the room, a woman stares at the ceiling with eyes that have stopped seeing. Her name has already been forgotten, but her procedure won't be. She underwent a mastectomy, the removal of a breast hardened by disease, its shape distorted by something growing beneath the skin. No anesthesia, no sedation, just a curved blade and several men holding her still, while the surgeon carved through skin and muscle like he was peeling fruit. The bleeding was intense, so was the screaming. She screamed until she couldn't. Now she doesn't speak at all. There's a man 2 cots over who had a bladder stone. If that sounds minor, you haven't heard how they removed it. He was cut open between the legs, just behind the scrotum, with a long curved blade. The stone, large, jagged and shaped like a punishment, was extracted with forceps. He was fully awake the entire time, restrained by leather belts and his own sobs. He tried to get up midway through. They held him down harder. Now he can barely sit up, and when he does, blood pools beneath him. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. He hasn't asked for anything. He just stares at his hands like they failed him. Then there's the boy, too young for this place, too small for the bed. His head is wrapped in linen, stained brown at the temples. Trepanation. A hole drilled into his skull to relieve pressure. Maybe from a head injury, maybe from seizures, maybe from something else no one had the tools to diagnose. They shaved his head and used a crank tool with a toothed wheel, like opening a wine bottle made of bone. He convulsed on the table. His mother fainted. He stopped moving after the 4th turn of the drill. Now he sleeps, if that's what you can call it, and sometimes whimpers through the night like he's still down there, under the blade. Every one of them thought the cutting would be the end of it, that once the blade was gone and the bleeding stopped, they'd begin the climb back toward life. But there is no climb. There's only waiting, hoping the fever doesn't rise, hoping the pus stays yellow and doesn't turn green, hoping you don't wake up in the middle of the night with a new pain, sharper, deeper, the kind that signals rot. You can smell all of them, not in a cruel way, but in the literal sense. The room is filled with it, blood, sweat, bile, smoke from nearby lanterns. Underneath that is the sweet, sickly rot of infected wounds and untreated trauma. It's a human smell, but in the worst possible sense. Not warmth or comfort, just breakdown, just decay. None of you speak. There's nothing to say. What could you possibly offer the man who was sawn apart while conscious? What comfort could you give the woman who had her body carved into for the sake of a chance? You are together in this. Your pain is mirrored in theirs, but there's no camaraderie, just a shared recognition, a quiet agreement that this is unbearable. And yet, here you are, bearing it. They are your chorus, your haunting, your one more voice in the long groaning song of pre-anesthetic medicine. You'll never know their names, they'll never know yours, but you will remember their eyes, their bandages, their stillness. And if you live through this, you will carry them with you, not as inspiration, not as strength, just as a warning. You're not alone, but right now you wish you were. It's quiet now, not truly quiet, but quieter than it was. The kind of stillness that only arrives when something has ended and no one is quite sure what to do next. You're no longer being held down. The blade is gone. The voices have dulled, but your ears are still ringing, not from sound exactly, but from the memory of it. The screams, the scrape of metal, the snap of sinew. They echo inside you, like a song you can't forget, even though you never wanted to hear it in the first place. There's a moan from somewhere nearby, not a scream, not even pain exactly, just a low, slow release of breath from someone else trying to remember how to be alive. It drifts across the ward and fades before it reaches the wall. No one answers. Everyone is too tired to care. Or maybe they've all made an unspoken pact not to interrupt the quiet. The smell is still here. Heavier now. It clings to everything. The sheets, the bandages, the floor, your skin. Blood, old and new. Sweat dried into fabric. The distinct, almost sweet stench of burned flesh. The byproduct of cautery, when they seal the wound with hot iron and prayers. You didn't see the iron, but you felt it. You can still smell it. A metallic bite layered over scorched skin, and something deeper beneath. The smell of things that are supposed to stay inside being coaxed into the open. There's vinegar in the air too. Someone somewhere swabbing a wound with the closest thing they have to antiseptic. It doesn't mask anything. It just adds another note to the composition. Sharper, sour, and somehow worse. You breathe through your mouth. It helps until it doesn't. The light is dim now. The lanterns are still burning, but they've been turned down to conserve oil. Shadows stretch longer than they should. The corners of the room have vanished into them. You can hear footsteps moving across the boards, slow, dragging, deliberate. A nurse maybe, or a student, or the surgeon himself, doing a final pass like a priest after a ritual. The steps don't pause. They just drift by your bed and continue into the distance like they were never really here. Your body is humming, not in a healthy way. It's the pulse of pain dulled by shock, the phantom pressure of a limb that's no longer attached, the strange weight of your own skin. You're hot in places, cold in others, damp with sweat or blood or both. Everything aches. Your eyelids are too heavy to lift, but your mind refuses to sleep. It floats instead, just above your body, just behind your eyes. Watching. Somewhere to your right, someone is crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, wet sound. The kind of sobbing that happens when someone's too tired to even try to stop. It's the sound of loss without explanation, of grief without ceremony. You want to turn your head to see them, but your neck won't cooperate. So you lie still, listening. You count the spaces between their breaths. You start to wonder if they're counting yours. The air is thick, not just with smell but with weight, like the walls are leaning in, like the room has absorbed everything that happened here and is holding its breath, waiting to see who lives long enough to be remembered. There's something sacred in it, or maybe just something rotten. Either way, it doesn't let you go. At some point the surgeon says something low to his assistant, just a word or two, not meant for you. The assistant nods, shuffles away. The surgeon lingers a moment longer. Maybe he glances at you, maybe not. You can't tell anymore. Eventually his footsteps join the others. Another pair of shoes squeaking toward a door that closes without ceremony. Silence again. Not pure, never pure. There's always someone shifting in bed. Always the faint wheeze of lungs trying to remember their rhythm. Always a creak or a drip or a whimper. But compared to before, the frenzy, the slicing, the chorus of pain, this is silence. And it feels enormous. Heavy enough to lie under like a second blanket. You begin to drift, not to sleep, not yet, but to something softer than pain. A fog, a haze, the line between your thoughts blurs. You think of things that aren't real, of light through trees, of cold river water, of someone's hand on yours. It's not comfort, but it's close enough. You hold on to it like a plank in open water. You are not healed, you are not safe, you are not even certain you're alive. But for the moment at least, you are still. And that, for now, will have to be enough. You might think surgery was already a nightmare, and you'd be right. But like everything in history, it got worse depending on who you were. Pain is universal, but mercy is not. In this world, whether you suffer quietly in a hospital bed or get hauled in for practice depends on your clothes, your gender, your skin, and how much your life is worth to the people holding the knives. If you're poor, you don't go to the hospital. The hospital comes to you, usually in the form of an apprentice surgeon looking for a live body and low expectations. You're cheap, replaceable, a footnote in someone else's education. Maybe you showed up begging for help, and someone finally agreed. Not because they believed they could save you, but because you were the kind of person no one would miss if they didn't. A teachable moment in rags. Your care is rushed, crude, maybe done in the back of a workhouse or on a kitchen table. There's no clean linen, no trained assistants, no real follow-up. If the surgeon has time, he might wrap the wound. If he's drunk, he might not. Either way, you're sent home to heal in the same filth that probably made you sick in the first place. And if you die? Well, that's one less mouth to feed. Wealth, on the other hand, buys you a few advantages. Not anesthesia, that doesn't exist for anyone yet, but it can get you a private room, cleaner bandages, and a surgeon who takes the time to wash his hands, if only out of respect for the furnishings. Your surgery might be slower, more careful, even less humiliating. You may get silk thread for stitches. You may get actual rest. You might even be called by your name instead of just the case. It won't save you if infection sets in, but it'll make the dying look more dignified. Then there's gender. If you're a woman, the odds shift again. Not just because of biology, but because of how little men understand it. Surgery for women meant childbirth most often. Complications, hemorrhaging, retained placenta, infections. No one knew what they were doing. Not really. Uteruses were mysteries. Ovaries were sources of suspicion. Hysteria was still a diagnosis. And if you needed surgery down there, you'd better hope you were unconscious from blood loss, because otherwise the procedure would be performed with a room full of students, watching, whispering, and pretending not to stare. Midwives knew more than most doctors, but they were rarely respected. Instead, they were accused of superstition or blamed when something went wrong. Women bled out routinely. Babies were still born or pulled out with iron tools that crushed their skulls. And if you managed to survive the birth, there was still the risk of fistulas, tearing that left you incontinent, stinking, and socially exiled. For this, there was sometimes surgery, but often you were simply cast aside, marked as unclean, ruined. Then there were the people who didn't consent at all. If you were enslaved, your body was not your own. It was property, and property could be cut open without permission. Surgical experimentation on enslaved people was common, particularly in the name of advancing science. They were anesthetized less often, even when the technology became available, because it was believed they didn't feel pain the same way. A lie dressed up as science to make cruelty sound like progress. One infamous surgeon built his reputation on gynecological procedures performed on enslaved women, without anesthesia, without consent, and often repeatedly. The same woman cut open again and again, her body a test site, her pain a data point. She has a name, a history. But most textbooks didn't bother to include it. Prisoners were used too, especially those awaiting execution. After all, what harm could you do to a man already sentenced to die? Surgeons practiced new techniques, new tools, new incisions on men in shackles. Sometimes the surgery killed them, sometimes it didn't. No one asked if they wanted to be part of the lesson. In this world, the hierarchy is simple. If you are wealthy, white, male, and respectable, your pain is regrettable. Worth minimizing, worth discussing. If you're poor, or a woman, or black, or imprisoned, your pain is expected, useful, sometimes even dismissed altogether. Your body becomes a demonstration. Your screams become background noise. You lie there, recovering, or trying to, and you realize something about the way they look at you. Not with cruelty necessarily, but with indifference, with the calm, distant gaze of people who don't expect you to have a voice in the matter. You are not a person recovering from trauma. You are the material left behind after an experiment. You are the remains. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll be remembered in someone's notes. As case number 17, or female, age unknown, or the one that didn't make it. That's the hierarchy here. That's the cost. The knife doesn't discriminate, but everyone else does. They're calling it a miracle now. Not in the fire and lightning sense, but in the quiet, clinical way people whisper about something that shouldn't work, but somehow does. It's called anesthesia, a word that means without sensation, which is something you would have paid dearly for, if it hadn't arrived just a little too late. You'll hear stories from the next ward over, of patients being put to sleep before the first incision, of silence where there once were screams, of operations that take twice as long, because surgeons no longer have to race the clock, because now, time doesn't equal torment. Instead of straps and gags, there are cloths soaked in sweet-smelling chemicals. Instead of holding you down, they simply ask you to breathe in and let go. The first real moment came in 1846 in Boston. A man named William Morton demonstrated the use of ether during surgery. The patient felt nothing. Nothing. Not pain, not panic, not even the cold of the blade. Just a drift into unconsciousness and a calm return, stitched and sore, but otherwise intact. It shocked the medical world. Some cried, some scoffed, but no one forgot it. And yet, even after that, adoption was slow. Change, even when it's a gift, comes with suspicion. Surgeons had built their reputations on speed and endurance. Pain was a measure of professionalism. Patients, in a grim way, expected it. They'd seen friends scream on the table and survive. It was terrible, yes, but it was familiar. This new stillness? This chemical sleep? It felt unnatural, like cheating, like a trap. Some patients refused it at first. They didn't trust a thing they couldn't feel. They feared not waking up. They feared being too still, too open, too vulnerable. There were rumours that ether caused brain damage, that it dulled the soul, that you could die in your sleep and never know. And in fairness, they weren't entirely wrong. Early experiments were crude. Doses were uneven. Some people didn't wake up. Others vomited, convulsed, stopped breathing. Progress always brings casualties. Some surgeons resisted too, not out of malice, but out of habit. They didn't trust what they didn't control. A conscious patient could respond. Flinch, shout, react. A drugged one? That was uncharted territory. The knives they'd spent decades mastering suddenly felt like foreign tools. Their rhythm was broken. The performance was gone. What was surgery without speed? Without the applause of surviving screams? Then came chloroform. Smoother, faster, more palatable. It spread quickly across Britain and Europe. Endorsed by royalty, Queen Victoria herself used it during childbirth, and that made people take notice. If it was safe enough for a queen, surely it could be trusted. The idea of painless childbirth felt blasphemous to some, revolutionary to others. Either way, The public began to demand what only a few years earlier had seemed unthinkable: to be operated on without suffering. Hospitals changed. Operating theatres became quieter, cleaner. Some even started boiling tools between uses. Doctors began wearing aprons not for prestige, but for hygiene. New ideas took root. Not all at once, but steadily. The world of medicine stepped cautiously into the age of compassion. But you missed it. You're in the crack between centuries, the moment just before the dawn. You are the generation of transition, the body on the slab that showed everyone what not to do. You're the reason things changed, and the reason they took so long. You endured the fire so someone else could feel the warmth of absence. It doesn't feel fair, and it isn't. There's no comfort in knowing you lived just before the pain became optional, that you bled, screamed, trembled your way into someone's dusty footnote, while the next patient drifted to sleep under a white cloth and woke up stitched but silent. But still, it matters, even if no one remembers your name, even if the surgeon moved on to newer methods and newer patients, even if the world improves just after you needed it to. The change came, and you were part of the reason. You were the warning, the lesson, the final argument. And now, as you lie there in the too late quiet, you can almost imagine it. A hand offering you a cloth, a voice telling you to breathe, a blade that doesn't burn, a moment lost in soft darkness instead of agony. It's not real, not for you, but it's real for someone. It came too late to save you, but it came. You're still breathing. That much is true. Shallow, uneven breaths that rattle faintly in your chest, but they're there. Each one arrives like a surprise, like your body hasn't decided whether it's done yet. The pain hasn't lessened, not really. It's just changed shape, gone from sharp and immediate to dull and sprawling, like a fog crawling along your bones. Whether that means you're healing or decaying is still unclear. You've stopped asking the surgeon questions, mostly because he stopped answering. You're not sure if that's because he's busy or because he's already counted you out. He still checks the bandages, mutters something to an assistant, and moves on. His face doesn't tell you anything. You're just another wound on the schedule. And maybe the blood loss was bad. You knew that at the time, though you couldn't quite process it. You could feel it leaving you in waves, warm, wet, draining. You remember thinking your arms felt too light, like they weren't connected anymore. The dizziness is still with you, curling at the edges of your vision when you try to sit up. You're not sure how much blood you lost. No one is. They weren't counting. You're not a ledger entry. You're a rough estimate. The fever comes and goes. Sometimes you shake so badly you can't speak. Other times, you sweat until your sheets stick to your back, soak through and sour. Then it passes, and you feel almost human again. For a few hours at least, enough to believe you might be getting better, until your joints start to ache, and the nausea returns, and your skin goes cold for no reason and you can name. Someone cleaned your wound, you think. It's hard to tell. The bandage was changed, though not as often as you'd like. The cloth they used smelled faintly of mould, like it had been sitting too long in a drawer. You don't ask where it came from. You don't want to know. You try to believe that it's helping, that there's something antiseptic in the vinegar burn, something sacred in the sting. But mostly, you just lie still and wait for whatever comes next. There's talk of gangrene, not directed at you, but nearby. A man down the hall had his foot removed 2 days ago. Now there's a smell creeping into the corridor. Sharp, sour, wrong. The nurses are whispering. The surgeon hasn't said anything, but he's brought the saw again. He doesn't bring it unless he plans to use it. You try not to imagine the same fate for yourself, but it's hard when you can feel your toes going numb. You don't sleep much, not real sleep. You drift in and out, haunted by half-formed dreams where the surgery never ends. Sometimes you wake up gasping, unsure whether the pain in your leg is new or just a memory. Time stretches, days blur. You start to measure them in visits, when the bandage is checked, when the other patients moan louder, when someone dies and their bed is suddenly empty. You don't know what they'll say about you when this is over. If you survive, you'll be a curiosity, a story, a scarred example of what the body can endure. People will nod solemnly when you tell them what happened, but they won't really understand. How could they? They didn't hear the saw. They didn't feel the tremble in your jaw when your tongue had nowhere to hide from your own teeth. They didn't smell themselves rotting and hope it was just a dream. And if you don't survive, you'll be another body to carry out. Not the first, not the last. Someone will strip the bed, wipe the frame, and fill the space before the hour is out. You might get a passing comment, a name muttered under breath, or maybe just a number. Either way, the bed won't stay empty. But let's say for a moment that you do survive, that your fever breaks, that the wound stays clean, that your blood starts to circulate like it remembers how. What then? You might walk again, you might not. You'll carry a limp or a stump or a stitched together reminder that your body was opened like a letter someone didn't know how to reseal. You might lose an eye, or the use of a hand, or just your ability to sleep without seeing the blade again. You might also lose your mind. That happens too. Some patients walk out, but never really return. They speak less, flinch more, refuse to look at metal or fire or anything white. They're not mad, not exactly. Just displaced, stuck between before and after, living in the echo of what happened. So yes, you survived. Probably. Maybe. It's hard to say. Survival here isn't clean. It isn't triumphant. It's not the end of anything. It's just the absence of death. For now. You're still breathing, still sweating, still waiting. And in this place, that's the closest anyone gets to hope. It happened. You know that now, though it still feels distant, unreal, like something you watched happen to someone else, from just outside the frame. But your body remembers. It remembers everything. The cold of the table, the pressure on your arms, the sound of cloth being unrolled, the slow, steady sharpening of a blade. You were there for every moment. That's the part that loops in your mind. Not the pain, not exactly, but the presence. You were awake, not in the dreamy, drifting sense of half-sleep or fogged memory. Awake like an open door. Awake like a scream that never stopped echoing. You remember the surgeon's breath, the way he didn't look at you when he picked up the knife, the way his hands moved. Confident, practiced, uncaring. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't kind either. You weren't a person to him. You were the next problem on the list, the next limb, the next case. You remember the first cut. Not because it was the worst, though it was bad, but because it was the start. You felt the skin part, felt the edge slide in, and for a moment your brain couldn't process it. There was no warning, just a sudden searing heat and a cold panic that bloomed in your spine. You opened your mouth, but the scream came too late. The pain was already ahead of it. You remember the sound of the saw. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, it was methodical. Back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't the noise that got to you, it was the feeling, the pressure through your bone, the vibration in your teeth, the way your body jerked with each pull, as if it were trying to escape 1 inch at a time. You remember how long it took, not in minutes because time stopped meaning anything, but in beats of your heart, in breaths you couldn't finish, in the way your fingers curled into fists and never unclenched, long after the saw was gone. You remember someone holding you down. Maybe it was one person, maybe 3, you can't recall, but you remember the weight, the effort it took just to keep you still. And even with that, your body fought. It didn't want to be opened. It didn't want to be part of this. You remember the smell, not just blood, but the cautery, the hot iron sealing flesh, the smoke curling up from your own body, like incense from a ruined altar. It didn't even hurt at that point. Not because the pain had stopped, but because it had reached a place where pain became something else. A hum, a roar, a blanket you couldn't take off. You remember being awake. That's what stays with you. Not the specifics, not the gore, but the fact that you were there, present, trapped in a body that was being treated like meat while your mind tried to stay somewhere safe. You remember being awake. You remember being awake. You remember being awake. You lie here now, after the fact, and it plays on a loop. Not as a nightmare, but as something quieter, a memory with no beginning and no end, a wheel turning. You blink and you're back on the table. You close your eyes and you hear the rasp of the saw again. You shift in bed and feel the ghost of the blade dragging along your skin. You wonder if it will ever stop. Not the pain that's already starting to fade, but the remembering, the constant return, the moments revisited out of order, uninvited, unwelcome. A face, a smell, a sound, a touch. Your body collects them like dust. Every time you move, you stir them up again. You don't know what healing means in a world where you are conscious for your own destruction. You don't know if there's such a thing as recovery after something like this. You survived, maybe. You endured, definitely. But you're not whole, not really. You're a version of yourself that didn't exist before the knife. A version with knowledge no one should have. They'll tell you it's over now, that the worst part has passed, that your body will mend and your mind will follow. And maybe eventually they'll be right. But for now, all you know is this. You were awake when they opened you. You were awake when they cut. You were awake when they closed you back up. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how quiet the ward becomes, no matter how deep you fall into sleep, you still are. So here we are, at the end, or near enough. You've been stitched or bandaged, or maybe just left a scab, depending on who was still around when the bleeding slowed. The surgeon's long gone. He has other limbs to take, other bodies to crack open. He won't remember your name, if he ever learned it. But you'll remember his hands, his tools, the way the light caught the blade before it vanished beneath your skin. You'll remember the cold sweat, the sound of your own voice slipping out of you, the way time stretched and folded until nothing made sense except the next breath. And then the one after that, you've been through something that doesn't have a neat word. Trauma feels too clinical, suffering too dramatic. What happened to you was ordinary, for the time. That's the most terrifying part. It wasn't an accident, it was protocol. This was medicine, without mercy, without anesthesia, without the soft edge of forgetting. Maybe you survived, maybe you didn't. Maybe you're somewhere in between, half healed, half haunted, stuck in a body that still flinches when it hears footsteps and still dreams in crimson and steel. But even if you never walk again, even if your mind wanders too far to come back clean, one thing is certain. You made it through, or at least far enough to hear these final words. Murmured across the dark, like a lullaby carved into bone, you know now what it meant to be cut open before the age of kindness. You've walked the long, blood-slick hallway of history and reached the other side, limping, yes, but wiser in the worst possible way. So rest now. Sleep if you can. Dream soft and strange. And if your dreams bring you back to the table, if you hear the rasp of a saw or feel the ghost of a strap across your wrist, remember this. It ended. The blade is down. And whether you left the operating theatre or just became a part of it, you are no longer the one screaming. Good night.